Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here and you don't know me, my name is Hannah Buck. I go by hannahbreathes on the internet because I have something called cystic fibrosis, which affects my ability to breathe. So there's that. And usually I make pretty uplifting videos on my channel, but today my depression is being a little bit of a butt and I'm feeling a little sad, and it's also like pretty gray outside, and I just realized that I'm kind of in the appropriate mood and headspace to tell this story because I've been meaning to tell it since it happened. And that story, as you probably guessed by the title, is my experience going to the hospital and being on suicide precaution. Now, the reason that I'm telling this story is not to over dramatize what happened to me or to get attention or anything like that. The reason that I want to tell this story is because I know that I am not the only person who has experienced it, but there are very few people who talk about it. And obviously, as with everything that I share on this channel, I'm an open book to encourage other people to be open books as well, and so that people know that they're not alone. So I just wanted to get that disclaimer out there as to the reason why I'm filming this. Right now it is January 2017, and this all happened in June of 2016. Going back a little bit to February of 2016, I was on a spring break trip with a bunch of my best friends, and I realized that I'd only brought enough medication, enough antidepressants for about 3 days. I was gonna be there for 7 days. At the time, I think I was on about 50 milligrams of Zoloft, which is an antidepressant that also helps my anxiety because I have depression and anxiety disorder. And I decided that because we weren't super close to any pharmacies or anything like that, because we were in the mountains in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, I decided that I would wean myself off of the 50 milligrams so it wouldn't be a super sudden me quitting and going off my medication, because that can be kind of dangerous for people with depression. And so the first night I took 50, and then the next night I took 25, and then I think I did 25 the next night as well. And then I was out of medication, and I didn't take it for the rest of the trip because I intended on refilling that prescription when I got back home to Michigan. Now, when I got back home to Michigan, I forgot. And I forgot because I wasn't feeling particularly upset or sad or nervous, or at least I wasn't perceiving myself to be feeling that way. And 2 or 3 weeks went by. I don't know how, but they did, and I realized, whoa, I have not been taking my Zoloft. This is weird. Maybe I'm better because I feel like I'm fine. So without consulting my doctor or my social worker at the clinic or anything like that, I just kind of decided that I would stop taking it for a while to see how I felt. Please don't do this. This is not a good way to take care of your health. You should always be working in cooperation with your healthcare professionals. So February, March, April, and May went by, and I wasn't taking my antidepressant. In this span of months, I also went through a pretty messy breakup with someone that I had been dating for about a year and 3-ish months, and so it was pretty devastating to say the least, and that was occupying a lot of my headspace, and it wasn't something that I was dealing with particularly healthily or positively. Fast forwarding back to June, I got pretty sick with my cystic fibrosis, and I called my doctor to see what I should do, and he said I should come into the clinic so that I can be evaluated by him. So I went to the clinic and had my appointment, and he listened to my lungs and got all my stats and stuff like that, and decided that I would go on oral antibiotics as well as an oral steroid, prednisone. Because I hadn't been to the clinic in a while, he also wanted me to just check in with the social worker. So when I did that, it was revealed that I hadn't been taking my antidepressant, and she suggested that I go back on it immediately. The combination of starting my antidepressants again and starting prednisone is what really pushed me over the edge and got me into not such a great place. The first time I ever started my Zoloft, which had been a year before this incident, I went through a period of about 2 months of severe depression and severe anxiety. And this is normal when you start antidepressants. You're adjusting to all of the different chemicals that are going on in your brain, and a lot of the time it makes things worse before it makes things better. So I experienced a mini version of this when I restarted my Zoloft. In addition to that, it's known that steroids can have pretty drastic effects on your mood, and prednisone definitely did that for me during this time. So that appointment was on a Friday, and I went home over the weekend and was taking my Zoloft again, I was taking my prednisone again, and by Sunday, I was feeling pretty scary. I could not get out of bed. I could not eat. I could not talk to anybody, and this was pretty dangerous considering the fact that I was living completely alone in my apartment at the time. I had been starting to see someone new during this time, and it was a long distance situation, so they weren't able to be there to comfort me, but they did realize that something was wrong, and they called me on the phone, and I told this person that I was feeling really scared and that I didn't see any hope in life anymore, and that I didn't feel like I wanted to do life anymore. And this person, spent some time really trying to be there for me and cheer me up and get me out of this hole. But it's really not something that any one person can fix, especially when they're not a trained medical professional, and especially when they can't physically be there. So without my knowledge, that person reached out to my best friend in the entire world, Amber. You guys have seen her on my channel before. And she reached out to me and said, "Buddy, how are you doing?" And I said, "I'm not doing well, I'm really scared." And she encouraged me to tell my doctors how I was feeling. So I called back to the doctor's office, and my doctor asked how I was doing, and I said my lungs are a little better, but they still feel pretty crappy, and my mood has reached an all-time low. My doctor said, "Do you feel scared being there alone? Are you in danger?" And I didn't answer for about 10 seconds because I didn't want to. And he said, "Okay, I'm gonna need you to come into the hospital and we're gonna admit you." And I started crying, but I said okay. From there, I called Amber and I said, "I need you to drive me to the hospital, and I would really appreciate it if you could stay there with me." She said no problem, and she did, because she's my best friend. So she picked me up and we went to the hospital, and I got to my room on my normal cystic fibrosis floor, because while this was in large part a mental health admission, I still had lung issues that I had to work on. So that's why I was admitted to the CF floor and not to the psychiatric floor. Amber was just doing homework and other stuff on her computer in the corner of the room while I was in the bed getting questioned with all of the admission rigmarole that I usually have to do. No matter who it is, the nurses or the doctors or whoever is going through this part of the admission, they always ask every single person these same suicide screening questions. So I was used to hearing these questions, but I wasn't used to giving the answers that I was giving. But I always try to be honest with my healthcare team because I know that that's the only way they can help me. So I made myself not lie. The physician, because it was a doctor, seemed a bit on edge by the fact that I was in the hospital partly for my mood. She started off with the easy questions, like, in the last few days or the last 2 weeks, have you been have feelings of worthlessness or just extreme sadness? I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact wording. I said yes. Then she went to the next question, which was, in the last 2 weeks, have you had thoughts of hurting yourself or others? And I said yes, because I had thought about hurting myself, and I had actually, I should say, if you're a younger viewer, you may not want to watch the rest of this video, just please take precaution. But I had actually stood in the kitchen a few times during this really difficult weekend, and I had opened up my kitchen drawer and held a knife and just looked at it. I never used it, but I had really thought about cutting my wrist with that knife several times over the weekend. So I answered yes to that question, and she seemed to get a little more anxious. The next question was something like, in the last 2 weeks, have you wished to not be alive or to fall asleep and not wake up? And I said yes, because that's honestly exactly what I had been thinking during this really depressed period. Was I don't see life getting better, I don't see myself getting happier, and it'd be really nice if I could just go to sleep forever. That really is what I wanted at the time. I don't remember the exact term for this, but this is kind of a non-threatening suicidal ideation, which means that, like, and this is something that a lot of people experience, as I've been told by the therapists that I've worked with and stuff. But this basically means that, like, you're thinking about what it would be like because life is overwhelming and it seems kind of inviting to just not go through life anymore, but it does not mean that the person having these thoughts is actually planning on hurting themselves or killing themselves or actually doing anything. And that is what I was experiencing. I had feelings of, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to give up on how hard life is, but I was never actually planning on killing myself, and this is a very important part of the story. When I answered that, the doctor looked at me and her eyes got really wide, and I could see that she was feeling really nervous. From there, she went on to the next question that you would ask someone, which was, have you made any plans to hurt or kill yourself? Basically, do you actually want to do it? And to that I said, no, definitely not. Don't worry, like, my mood is really bad right now, but I feel safe in the hospital and my best friend is here and I know I'm gonna get really good care, so, like, don't worry. And she was like, okay, yeah, I believe you for sure. And then she finished up the admission questions and then she left. Not 5 minutes later, a nurse came into the room with a clear plastic tub, and in giant permanent marker was written suicide precaution box or suicide precaution or something like that. And she kind of slammed it down at the foot of my bed and looked at me, and I immediately froze, and Amber froze, and I said, "You're kidding." And she just said, "No." And I said, "Can you please explain what's going on? I'm really confused. This is unnecessary. Like, I'm very confused right now." And she said, "You are being placed on suicide precaution or suicide watch, and you need to give me all of your belongings that you brought with you, and I will place them in this box and take it with me out of the room." And I said, "I need to speak to a social worker," because I knew that I was not actually at risk for suicide, and I knew that this was wrong. And she said, "We've already paged the social worker, but we have to do this first." And my stomach just dropped, and I had no choice. I gave her my backpack, which had, like, my computer to do schoolwork, and books and journals and things that brought me a lot of peace, and I gave her the extra clothes I had brought. She took my shoes, and then I thought that's all she needed. And she pointed and she goes, "I need your phone." And I was like, "You're taking the means of communication away from someone who feels desperately alone in the world right now, because you think I'm going to hurt myself with my phone." But I gave it to them because I didn't have a choice, and she took the box and she left the room, and I was just bawling. I felt like a prisoner. I felt like no one trusted me, and I was really upset. I thought that was it until I would see a social worker, and I didn't know when that would be because they were apparently busy, and it was also nearing the end of the day, so they were going to go home soon, which was scary. But I just stayed in bed and tried to be calm until the nurse came back with a gown and told me that I had to take my clothes off and wear the gown instead, because even my clothes were apparently a danger to me. That made me feel really miserable because, I don't know, I'm kind of a modest person when it comes to my body and stuff like that. And she said, like, I had to give her my bra. I don't remember if I was allowed to keep my underwear on. I think I did anyway, but I had to give her all of my clothes. And so I took the gown and I, still sobbing, went in the bathroom to change, and I closed the door behind me so I could start undressing, and the door popped back open, and I was like, that was weird, and I grabbed it and I closed it again. And in the hospital, you can't lock the bathroom doors because if someone falls and the door is locked, they won't be able to get in, situations like that. So I knew I couldn't lock it, but I was trying to close it and it kept popping open. And I looked and I realized that the nurse was the one that was pulling the door open every time I closed it. And I said, "What are you doing?" And I was basically like screaming, getting hysterical at this point. And I will never forget what this nurse said or the way that she said it to me, because it seemed like she was enjoying herself in this moment, and that was particularly haunting and unsettling. But she said, "I am going to be in this room 24/7 with my eyes on you until I am told that I don't need to be here anymore. And that includes when you go to the bathroom." And I felt like I was in prison. So the door stayed open and I changed my clothes. I really had to pee, but God knows I wasn't going to do that. And I gave her my clothes and I held the gown closed in the back so she couldn't see my butt. Walked out of the bathroom, across the room, and sat in a chair in the corner of the room because I knew that if I got in the bed, she would see my private parts. And she stood at the front of the room and leaned against the wall, folded her arms in front of her chest like this, and just looked at me. And Amber was in her chair in the corner of the room trying to figure out what to do, asking the nurse repeatedly, "When are we going to be able to see the social worker? Like, you can't do this to her. This shouldn't be happening. She's not a risk to herself. She needs her stuff back. You're making her really upset. You're making her worse," which is what was happening. I was feeling much, much darker and scarier. And if I don't understand why, if I was a risk to myself because of my unhappiness before, why something like this would make me less of a risk to myself. I mean, I know they want to take away the dangerous things that I could have used to hurt myself at that time, but I didn't want to hurt myself before. I was starting to feel better. And now, if I ever wanted to hurt myself, it was now. If I ever wanted to escape the world I was living in, it was now, in this moment where I had no choice, no free will, none of my comforting belongings, I couldn't text my mom, I couldn't text anybody, I didn't have people's phone numbers memorized. I felt really trapped and like a prisoner. I don't remember how long it took, but because I was absolutely hysterical and sobbing, and my best friend was asking repeatedly for backup in this situation, I think I was only alone with Amber and this nurse in this room for about 30 minutes before finally a social worker was able to come in. And the social worker asked the nurse to leave, and she asked Amber to leave, so it was just her and I. And she asked me the same questions that I got asked upon admission, about if I wanted to hurt myself or fall asleep and never wake up, or if I'd made plans and all that stuff. And she immediately knew that I wasn't actually a risk to myself. I was just having these vague, non-threatening thoughts, these suicidal ideations that didn't actually mean I wanted to commit suicide. And she said, "This should not be happening to you. I will fix this. I'm very sorry." And she sent Amber back in, and the nurse came in to watch me again because someone had to keep watching me. But about 15 minutes later, the physician who put me on suicide precaution came back in with the social worker, apologized profusely for not doing what she should have done, which was send the social worker in the first place if she was feeling nervous about me hurting myself. And she apologized for putting me through that traumatic situation, because I thought I was going to be on suicide precaution for a long time, like through the night, guys. And that made me feel dark, and that made me feel scary. The thought of having to take a poop with someone in the bathroom with me and having someone watch me while I sleep because they didn't trust me not to kill myself, like, that didn't make me want to stay alive, honestly. But yeah, the nurse and the doctor apologized, and I was given my clothes back, and I was giving my things back. I said I never want that nurse to treat me ever again, which, looking back, I don't feel the same way anymore. I know she probably thought she was doing the right thing, but I just felt really, really haunted by how much joy she seemed to be getting out of the situation. And I have been to that same hospital several times since then, and that nurse has never treated me. So I don't know if that's a coincidence or if they actually wrote it down. I don't know. But from there, it was just a normal hospital stay with my lung stuff, and the only difference was I happened to be seeing the social worker more frequently, like every day, every other day. The social worker who got me out of suicide precaution, I had never seen her before, and I've never seen her since. But the social worker that I worked with throughout the rest of my hospitalization, I'm very familiar with. I really trust her. She listens to me, and she could just not believe that this happened. She couldn't believe that the physician and the nurse and whoever else didn't know the difference between threatening suicidal ideation and non-threatening suicidal ideation. And she recognized that I was put through more trauma than I should have been, and it actually slowed my healing and my mental health growth instead of making it go faster. I feel so thankful that I was only on suicide precaution for such a short amount of time. I'm not oblivious to this fact. I know that this was not a normal suicide precaution experience, and I'm not trying to say that it was. What I'm trying to say is that for what it was, for something so short, it was one of the darkest days of my entire life, because I was stripped of all autonomy. It felt like I was not in charge of myself or anything, and like I said, that didn't make me want to live. And knowing that people are out there who are already feeling so dark and go through this experience for hours, days, weeks, my heart is with you, and my thoughts are with you, and you are so strong. And I have only had a taste of what you've been through, but it was so freaking hard, and you are so strong. I know this was really long and rambly, and I didn't provide a lot of super tactile details, but I just wanted to share that, like, as someone who seems very happy all the time and is very smiley and loud and giggly, I've had an experience like that. And if I had an experience like that, just think about how many other people in your life have experienced something similar, whether or not they went to the hospital. Mental health is really hard, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with. But It's not something that a lot of people talk about. And I want you to know that there are people in your life who have struggled and not said anything because it's taboo and they feel like they'll be judged for it. And if you're one of those people who have struggled with mental health and are scared to talk about it, you don't have to talk about it. I believe you, and I am really, really sorry, and I'm with you in solidarity, and you're not alone. You are not alone. I'm still rambling, but I just felt like I needed to put this story out there somewhere for at least one person to find it, and I hope it helps somebody. And if you're wondering, since then my Zoloft dose has gone from 50 milligrams to 150 milligrams, and I do my best not to go off of it for even one night, because I know what can happen when I go to restart it again. But my mental health has been a lot more stable at this dosage, and life has been better since then. So yeah, that is where I'll leave you. If you've watched it to the end, thank you so much for caring about things that are important. I hope you share this with someone who you feel like it could help. If you feel like it was helpful, please give it a thumbs up so that more people can see it. And if you want to see more videos from me that are more upbeat than this one, just go ahead and click the subscribe button. I try to upload frequently, and yeah, thanks for listening to my story and for being a pal. Okay, keep your chin up, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.